Hey, it's Nate from Navigator Bookkeeping, and we're talking today about clinician profitability. Now, we've mentioned this in some other videos, like our three bookkeeping things to do in your private practice, but let's talk about clinician profitability for private practice a little more specifically. And I wanted to show you this too, so you can kind of see what this looks like. Now, first of all, before we get into this sheet, let's just talk about what is clinician profitability. It's basically a way of looking at the revenue that your clinicians are bringing in monthly, the costs that they're costing you as a practice and what they're taking home, and figuring out kind of what's the net from that. What are we keeping as a practice from each clinician? Okay, that's what clinician profitability is. Now, I suggest, and what I do with my clients is we look at this monthly, so that each month you kind of have a gauge of where clinicians are and how they're doing, and how much money basically the practice is keeping for each clinician, right? Our goal is each clinician is profitable and making money for the practice, and also getting paid a wage that makes sense for them and allows them to live the lifestyle that they want. So we want to kind of be in that balance where we're not cheating them and paying them nothing so we can make tons of profit, but also we are profitable on each clinician so that our practice is sustainable and healthy and can continue paying wages, right? That's the spot we're trying to hit. So let's look at this document and I'll kind of walk you through this. And just something, if you're interested, if you want to email me, you can email me at nate@navigatorbookkeeping.us, and I will send you this. If you don't want to create this, I mean, you're looking at it, so you can kind of create this, but this has all the formulas baked in. So if you want this, I can send it to you. Happy to do that. Just send me an email. So here's what we're going to do. Okay, let's look at this. First of all, we have the clinicians in column A there, right? So we list all the clinicians. We usually just put their name here. Revenue, this is the gross amount that they brought in for the month. So this is the total amount, probably from your EHR, that they brought in. We're not taking this from QuickBooks. We're pulling this from some sort of EHR. So a lot of our clients use Simple Practice. We're just basically saying what was the total they brought in for the month. That's what we're entering here. Contractor pay. They may not be contractors. This example I'm showing you is for contractors, but you could also just put this clinician pay or employee pay. It doesn't really matter what the title is. This is what they are making based off of those revenue amounts. So the formulas in here are based off of different splits mostly that some of these have. So I know this sheet is a mix of salary and splits. So some of the people in here might have like a 50-50 split, a 60-40 split, something like that. And then some of these clinicians have just a salary. So you're going to enter in here what each clinician is paid, how they're paid, right? And the nice way to do this is to use a formula so that when the revenue amounts change, you don't have to update anything on the clinician pay side. Practice pay is just saying how much is your practice keeping after the contractor is paid. To call back our three bookkeeping things you should do in your private practice video, this would be gross profit. We talked about gross profit and looking at that margin. This is your gross profit per clinician. It's how much are you keeping per each of your clinicians after they are paid. This is a section here that many practices will not think about and will not include in kind of their projections, right? This part is pretty normal. How much am I making for a clinician? This part, we're saying, what are your total overhead costs per month? So that means rent, utilities, office supplies, software, meals, travel, furniture, all those things. What's your total cost? And let's split it evenly amongst each of our clinicians, okay? And that's what we did here. Let's split it evenly amongst our clinicians so that we can figure out about how much operating costs do we need each clinician to cover? How much revenue do they need to bring in to kind of be getting to a break-even point, right? And the break-even point is basically their pay plus the operating costs. They need to cover at least that much to be bringing in additional money for the practice. Now, if they're negative in this column, practice pay, that means that either they're probably salaried. That's like what's happening here in row 9. This person is salaried and they didn't bring in enough to cover their salary. Or something is wrong in the formula. Because if there's a split, if they're making 60-40 or something like that, they're never going to be negative. So most people will be positive here in practice pay, and that's fine. Some people may be negative, though, in profit. And that means basically after the clinician has been paid in column C, there's not enough left over to cover the amount of costs that we want them to cover. Now, that doesn't mean they're actually losing the practice money. That just means they're not covering as much cost as we would ideally like them to. So if someone's negative here, don't go and fire them and say you're losing me money. That's not what this table is doing. This table is just saying they're not making as much as you would like them to. They're not at that kind of break-even point they ideally want them to be at. So that's kind of a key point. Row 8 is a good example here. They didn't bring in much revenue. There's 546 left over after they were paid that the practice kept, and then we want them to cover about $900. They didn't cover that, so they're minus 356. They didn't actually lose $356. They just didn't cover as much as we want them to. So to that clinician, I would say to the owner, if that is happening consistently, you want to have a conversation with them and say, hey, you're not meeting your minimums as far as how many clients you're seeing per week. You need to meet more. You need to see more people so that you're getting to that profitability point for the practice. So that's where this is really going to come in handy. Is you're gonna know kind of what's that point every clinician needs to get to. How many people do they need to be seen per week or per month to get to that point where they're profitable for the practice? The other nice part that you can do with this, and this is another big way to use this, which is really helpful for a lot of clients, is you can look at different pay structures here. So if someone's doing a 50-50 split and they want to move to a 60-40 split, you can mess around with this, right? In column C, I could change the formulas to go 60-40 instead of 50-50, and I could see how does that affect the practice and how does that affect how much my clinician is making. So it's a really helpful tool to use when you're kind of testing some things out. We have a client right now who's wondering if they want to move everyone to salary from contractor splits, which is a huge change. So we're using this tool to kind of look, hey, what is that actual cost going to look like for you? How is that going to change? Even if you're just wanting to move people from 1099 to W-2, right? Just basically change what kind of team member they are in your practice. This is really helpful where you can kind of say, okay, we know they're gonna make this much more because of payroll taxes. It's going to cost us more. What does that actually look like? How much less money are we going to make as a practice? And what does that influence? How much more revenue do they need to bring in to cover that? So you can use this as kind of a sandbox to kind of test out some of those theories as well. So it's very helpful for that as well. So this is the clinician profitability sheet. I think it's a huge value add for practice owners, just for the information you're going to be able to glean from past months, as well as projections you can make for future months as well. So like I said, if you're interested in getting one of these to use for your own practice, just send me an email. You can just put in the subject line, clinician profitability sheet, something along those lines. Write me some sort of message, and I'll send that over to you. If you have any questions, though, leave a comment below this video. I'm happy to respond. I usually respond pretty quickly. And be on the lookout for other videos we're doing, and we will talk soon. Thanks.